Hello, it's Amanda here from Suddenly Autistic, and this is my vlog where I am talking about the things that I'm discovering as a late diagnosed woman on the spectrum. So my diagnoses are autism, ADHD, complex PTSD, and generalized anxiety disorder, and I was diagnosed in my mid-40s, which was a few years ago. In this video I want to talk about anger. I want to explain anger a little bit more. I made a video and posted it yesterday about complex family systems and their impact of different, I suppose their impact on me, or that as an autistic person living in a complex family system and then being part of a complex family system that I had created. Want to so this is in follow-up from that and digging into the anger piece, because I did mention that I had been classifying myself as an angry person for a long time, and then I realized that that's because I was classifying any emotion around being sad, mad or scared as anger. That's how I was feeling it. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit more now, and hopefully that will be interesting to people and help understand or grow a little bit of emotional literacy and understanding about our own experience. I'm not an expert. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I know all about emotions, I'm going to teach you them all. That's ridiculous. I don't know whether anyone who's late diagnosed has the authority to teach others about their emotions, to be fair, because quite often we're late diagnosed for many reasons, not least because we didn't recognise it in ourselves, and we perhaps lacked some of the insights and understanding of interpersonal relationships that help other people. Anger, that feeling of rising injustice and frustration. Frustration was a huge one for me. I was constantly frustrated. And what was I frustrated and angry and upset about? Usually I can sum that up in the title of a movie, actually, and that's Girl Interrupted. I didn't see that film, even though that film came out in the 90s, and that was my time, I guess. I was alive then and aware of these things and able to go to the cinema, but I didn't see the film, but I did hear the title of the film, and as soon as I heard it, I didn't even know what the film was about. I only recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, watched the movie and realised it was about borderline personality disorder with Winona Ryder. It was a fantastic film, to be honest, and deserves its own reflection video, I guess, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I didn't relate to the character or that film at that point because I hadn't seen it. What I related to was the title of the movie, and the title of the movie gave me a narrative for my life to explain my anger for probably a good 20 years. And that's all it took. I felt like a girl interrupted, and I was frustrated, and then I was all the other emotions, but for me it was just this seething, boiling, upsetting anger. What is going on with the world? Why can I not just, because in my mind I just wanted to be left alone, not interrupted, accepted for the girl that I was. I'm not rude. I'm not, I can't stand here and say I'm not a rude person. I'm actually really nice, and then trash the place. But honestly, a lot of my life I was just fed up with being misunderstood by other people and mislabeled as being somewhat maybe aggressive and overly dominant and whatever and forceful, when actually I was just trying to find a way of being left alone, and I was constantly frustrated with being interrupted, with being derailed, and all the things that come with that. So that's what I'm talking about now, and that's what I'm going into. I still have COVID. You can't get it through the screen, thankfully, so you should be safe. But yes, my voice doesn't always sound this nasally. Maybe it's an improvement, who knows. Anyway, we're moving on. Anger is an extreme, was one way that I explained to myself and I suppose behaved or acted out in front of others an extreme stress response. So I spent the majority of my childhood and early adult life and into my 40s having angry feelings. I had a lot of angry feelings. And that's what I would have said. I said, oh no, I don't get so much sad. I just get mad. I'm just angry. I'm angry like a wolf. I'm like that wolf mother who's like, this is bad. Don't do it. No, setting boundaries and wanting that not to happen. I had and still have a strong sense of justice. And as such, I could be quite judgmental. So my anger was underpinned by a level of judgmental that no, what other people are doing is bad and wrong. This is not to say that I was one of those people who would go around correcting people and I'm not that interested in other people until they start to affect and interrupt me. So what would typically happen is that something would go on and somebody say I don't know, for want of a better place, I suppose, work. Let's say a work environment. I was, for other reasons which will become clear later, I was one of those can-do people. I generally put my head down. I'd do a lot of work. I was quite capable and very clever at what I do, and quite unique in the way my brain works. Quite unique. Is that even a thing? Unique. Own it. I'm unique. Special. Amazing. Yeah, there's some narcissism words coming in there. I did feel special and I did feel different. I didn't feel special as in above everybody else, but I knew I was owning the talents and skills that I had, say, in the workplace, and I understood the value that I brought. And I understood it objectively and factually because I could see the results I was getting. And I got promoted. I had my own business, my own consultancy for many years. That ran okay. Bumps along the road usually with the people side of things, and mostly me not bleeding myself dry to sort of please and everyone else. Again, that will come later, the fawning response. But no, I spent my life quite angry in work situations, especially because I'd come up and I'd do what it said on the tin. I'm there to work. I know what my job is. Not always. That could also be frustrating, but usually I knew what I had to do and I just wanted to do it. I wanted to do it well, and I didn't want to be interrupted or upset by other people. So, of course, in a work environment, things change. When I was working for other people in corporate scenarios, they'd come up and they'd say, you've got to do this budget. So I'd sit there and I'd do the budget for my sales patch because I was in sales and marketing. And then it wouldn't be good enough. So they want you to go back. Well, you've got to find another 500,000. You've got to make them, that you need to sell more of this. And I'd be like, well, that's not going to happen. Well, you can't say that. That's not, don't be oppositional. Don't be whatever. You've just got to make it happen. Don't bring me a problem. Bring me a solution. It drove me insane. That drove me insane because there was no basis to this. Little did I know that that's the game you play in corporate sales. A lot of my friends who were co-workers and friends who I was working with who were fairly successful in that were just saying yes, okay, and they were putting numbers in. They weren't sitting there thinking, well, or ringing people and going, hey, Bob, how much of that are you going to buy this year? Oh yeah, okay, well, I'll write that down then. They just made it up. There wasn't a Bob. There was Rod, Jane and Freddie out of the Rainbows. They just put the numbers in. What numbers do you need, boss? Oh yeah, all right then, blah, 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 blah. There you go, mate. Did it matter that it didn't happen, that they weren't tracking on that through the year? No, not really, because, budget's the ones, you know what I'm saying. I couldn't understand why people would ask me to do something and then not want it done well and not want it done to a factual state. I couldn't understand why people didn't want to know when it wasn't going to happen so that they could make a better plan and that we could pivot and change. To me, these are all things that you want in a business, and it just drove me nuts. So I spent a lot of my time angry about that and I left. Because I have that kind of anger that goes inwards. So I understood and respected the role of the directors, the managers, the whatever. I didn't necessarily like them all, especially middle management. I had a few problems with middle management, being a young woman who knew her stuff and often being managed by slightly older guys who thought they knew a lot more, but I don't think they did. So yeah, I did have my own level of judgmental, I'm not doing that for you type ofness, but generally speaking, I was the team player in as much as if I had the job, I respected the position and the team, the rights of the directors to steer the ship in whichever way they wanted, and but I could not lie. I had, again, it's this sense of justice and that sense of, we're only here once, guys. Why are you lying to yourself? Why are you making crap up? Why are you telling us to do this? I just didn't get it. I didn't get it. I didn't get the corporate game. So that did used to come up to being a whole big stress response, and especially in the work environment, because like every single other person who wasn't born a millionaire or whatever, I mean, I had to work. I had to pay for things. I have always been up until now, actually, when now I'm not the main breadwinner in our family, but I was always the top earner in the family, not because I wanted that role or that what do you call it, power, but because I recognised that I had the most qualifications, I had good skill set, I could go out and earn some money, pretty good much, and that would be good for our family. So I did what I had to do, and I took that seriously, and I kept doing it until this year. So this is the year that I stopped doing that. So what's this all got to do with being autistic? Well, it didn't have anything to do with being autistic when I was doing a lot of that, because I was just doing it because that was a script I grew up with. That was my value. That was me living to my values and me having a low emotional intelligence. So my low level of emotional intelligence was, like I said, wrapping the sad, the mad, and the scared together as anger, and I was feeling very angry. Now, angry is quite a motivating emotion, so I would let it, I would try and work through. I wouldn't sort of be a victim of it, I didn't think. I was always trying to work out what was going on. Was it me? I often felt it was me, as opposed to everyone else is just an idiot and I'm brilliant. No, that was rarely the thought that went through my head. Most often it was frustration, because it was like, well, how come I can't do this right? Why aren't they happy when I'm showing them what's wrong? Why do they then need me to solve their problems? I'm not paid that much. All of this stuff. Underneath that anger from that extreme stress response were feelings of guilt, being ashamed, feeling stupid, and then feeling isolated. I felt like I was drifting away from the pack, and in a work situation that would feel like I was the turd in the swimming pool of the party a little bit, that everyone else is kind of happy, and they're not happy. They tell you they don't like your jobs, but then they turn up and they do the thing and they want to get promoted. I didn't. I just want to be left alone. And I felt like a turd in the swimming pool. Anyway, that kind of thing. So the extreme stress response, me being angry and being this girl that was interrupted, and it was only really since going through the diagnostic process that I was able to unpick that anger and see that a lot of the time there was a lot of frustration. So I was angry, I was mad. I felt the distance between me and others because I was frustrated. I was frustrated by a system that couldn't just be honest about their intentions and have direct communication. And to be fair, that still frustrates me, and I still find that really hard, that's not the norm of communication between people. There's all these games that go on. What's been a bit easier for me now, as I've recognised myself, I've got more skilled, I've had more time, and now I'm in a position where I've got some more downtime in my work. I'm only working 3 days a week now and having a lot more time to reflect and recover, and I'm working in a different environment where people don't lie as much, if at all, to be fair. Although everyone's human, you've got to expect a little bit of game playing. But the games, I didn't understand the games, and I suppose that then comes back to the family system. So I'll bring it back to a family dynamic. So I found my family of birth and my family I made extremely stressful for lots of reasons. Sometimes it was the behaviour and the stress responses of other people. So when other people get stressed, they go into their own coping mechanism, and that didn't ring true with me, and this sort of narrow definition of what's the truth and what's right versus what's wrong. So for example, in my birth family, we had a situation where you'd get somebody who'd get a bit upset and tantrumy, and I didn't like that. I'm like, well, what's that going to achieve? What's the point in stamping your feet? What do you think you're going to get with that? That's just silly. And I couldn't see that was that person trying to regulate or process their frustration. To me, it was just, well, that's not going to do anything. Why would you do that? But I couldn't understand that once you're in that extreme stress response, there isn't a rational rational, you're not thinking with that higher order thinking, you're in the moment. And that again then made I suppose it sort of fed into this complex PTSD that I've got, because lots of things would happen that I just couldn't understand. And while there were some big things that happened that were objectively terrible, there were lots of micro things, and often it was around how people behaved when they were under stress. So I was often under stress. I also had eczema, like really bad skin, that used to have to get bandaged and whatever. I mean, I was not comfortable, literally not comfortable in my own skin. So there was a level of stress and anxiety around myself and my health anyway, let alone the ebb and the flow of your birth family with siblings and young parents and running a business as well, and lots of interruptions and ill health and lack of emotional intelligence, I guess, throughout the group. So one of the things that, just to reiterate, one of the things that has always made me very, like, extremely stressed, and therefore go into my extreme stress response, which used to be just anger, is the emotionality of other people. And not just that, because I can understand and let people have their emotions. I'm not scared by or upset by emotionality in others per se. But what I do find very difficult is when other people, which is their prerogative, have stress responses that don't make sense to me. To me, it made sense to get angry. I mean, and that again is that this is a lack of insight. This is me having a lack of insight, well, I can see logically I'm angry about that because that is bad, and this is bad because of X, Y, and Z. But like I said, why are you stamping your feet? That's ridiculous. That doesn't solve anything. Another extreme stress reaction that was common in my birth family was flight. So we've got the fight, which was me mostly, but it wasn't just me, there was other people. Then there's the flight, which is the dissociation. Now I could understand this a little bit because I did this too, although I wouldn't have necessarily I didn't necessarily pick up that that's what was going on for everyone. Some of the flight, yes, being dissociation. So literally the fight response, you're going to fight the bear, whatever it is that's in front of you, the aggressor. The flight response is you're going to run away. And one way of running away, or, you know, fleeing, I suppose, or flighty, being a bit flighty, is to dissociate, to go out of your body, to have an out-of-body experience, to daydream, to sort of drift away from the pack, if, as it were, to protect yourself. So you might physically run away, or you might go inwards with that, which is the dissociation. So I recognised that and I could see it, and I wasn't so critical of the dissociation in that guise. But what really did my head in, and for a long time, well into my 40s, was the type of flight behaviour that involves fantasy. So flight's a fantasy. So in my family system, I suppose in general, in the bigger picture, so my family system that I'm a bigger part of, there have been coping strategies that I've observed and been in, I suppose, been privy to, that have involved the person making up what, from my perspective, making shit up. Now that is very judgmental, and again, I do understand that I do run towards that judgment, which is a sort of blunt tool for me to justify my anger. So I still have that a little bit, but I don't mean it with the intensity now that I did then. So I'm noticing it and I'm curious, well, what's behind that? So when I say there's making shit up, making stuff up, I'm talking about personas and acts and alternate realities. Those sort of moments when life is clearly quite tough for people, that they decide the best thing they can do is to be somebody else. So they leave themselves and they create a persona for an act. I guess one way that you could see that this happened, and it used to drive me nuts, is you go to your posh friend's house that are probably going to private schools and you've got professional careers instead of labouring careers, and all of a sudden the accents come out, the manners are a bit better, you know, the little finger goes up when drinking tea, that kind of thing. And now I'm not saying that that's what we all did, but this is a good example of something that we could have participated in, it could have happened, and that definitely starts to think about it, fits into this flight response. Now there's a little bit of that that's called manners, and everybody does it, you act appropriate to the situation. Apart from when I say everybody, I struggle with that. I struggle to filter and segment my behaviour so that I turn up appropriately in different situations, and as such I can say things that then bring me into that shame space because I've said or done the wrong thing or not an appropriate thing. Back to what was making me angry and this extreme stress response. So I'd get very stressed when we go into a fancy situation, and then people in the family system start acting fancy and making excuses and even telling stories that I'm like, well, that's not true. That's not true. And I want to correct them, but again, I've not been that kind of person or that person that would necessarily do that in the moment, because I do understand some rules of social etiquette and that might shame them, and that's not what you want to do to your family or your people in public. So you just sit there. But unfortunately, I don't have the face that can lie. So, my face would be like, what? Who? I'll be looking around and my body language would be betraying the people, but that would basically then put me into a dysregulated state, because in my mind I'll be thinking, well, if they can lie because it was a lie, it was either true or it was a lie. There was no middle ground, there was no context, there was no nuance to social communication. It was just, no, you're lying. Why? And if you can lie here, how can I ever trust you? So black and white. So the third extreme stress response that as humans do is freeze. So we freeze. I wouldn't recognize this at all in others, I have to say. This is definitely something that was just in me, and I didn't recognize that's what I was doing until after diagnosis and working through a few things. So freeze for somebody who's autistic is a shutdown, and a shutdown is extremely difficult to get out of because of a thing called autistic inertia. So when we're going, when we're stopped, we're stopped. I read a thing that it's like moving a stopped autistic person or a shut down autistic person who's like trying to push a stalled car. Basically, it's hard, it's very difficult, it's very stressful, it's almost impossible at times. Freezing during an extreme stress response was something I did, and like I said, it wouldn't trigger anger and anything like that to me when I saw, because I didn't see other people freeze, but I froze. And what it did was then trigger anger in me about my own extreme stress response. So now I'm getting more stressed by my own protective stress response. So I would freeze and shut down. I'd have skill regression, find it hard to communicate, drop things, get more clumsy. That then would play into the narratives I've already got about myself, that I'm useless, I'm part of the problem. Why did I have those? Because of the society I grew up in, the family system I grew up in, the expectations I had of myself, and my narrow definition of what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. So I set myself up for a fail in a lot of ways, but I didn't have any other explanation other than this wasn't the way it was supposed to be. So I hated on myself, and then I'd get angry because of it. The last one that I want to talk about in here before we run out of time is fawning. And I mentioned fawning a little bit at the beginning, and this is something that I really don't like myself for. And I say that in the present tense because I still struggle with this. I identified myself more readily as an angry person than a fawning person, as in, oh, let me do what you want me to do, I'll be who you want me to be, oh, are you happy now? And then saying, I don't like being that two-faced. I don't like doing something and making promises and then not being able to fulfill them or not even wanting to. I like to be genuine and forthcoming and plain speaking, but there's a part of me that's learned scripts based on the fight, flight, freeze response narratives that I've had and what the outcomes have been. So growing up and into my adult life and up to my mid-40s, when I started to recognize what I was doing, I act out of script. And I think now I know what's fed that, and that's the delayed processing that's come with autism. So for me, delayed processing is, while I can think fast and slow, there's a book, I can't remember his name, but I've got it somewhere up here. While I can think incredibly quickly and synthesize all these ideas, when it comes to emotional input, I tend to be quite clunky and slow. So, for example, I might be out in public or with some friends, and one of my friends says, "Hey, do you want to join us for dinner tomorrow night?" I'm more likely to say yes, okay, in that moment than to say, "Let me have a think about that and get back to you," or even no. Having said that, it's easier for me to say no than "let me have a think about it." Let me have a think about it and take up some space and put you on hold mode is just something that doesn't come into my brain, or hasn't up until now. The reason it's more likely, and I used to joke about this, saying my husband was Mr. No and I was Mrs. Yes, because I'd always say yeah and then figure it out as I went, whereas he'd say no first, because it's always then a bonus if you think about it and say yes. This happens without my registering it. So fawning, as in saying yes to things, taking things on and whatever, is not, I don't believe, part of an extreme stress response where I'm trying to please and appease other people. If I'm honest, I don't really care what other people think in that moment. If I don't want to do something, I don't want to do it. It's more of a learnt response that sort of kicks in because my delayed processing, my brain isn't there at that moment. So things are coming in and my processor goes, "Oh yeah, take this script that people like. Oh yeah, I'll come to that." Then what happens to me is I go home, and maybe that night, maybe a few days later, I'm like, what did I do? Why did I say yes to that? I can't even do it. I've got other things on, or I can't go there. I don't like it, or I don't even like the menu, or I wasn't really sure, or maybe, yes, I do want to go, but I don't think I've got the social battery. Extreme stress responses: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I've tried to go through them all here with you and explain how that all led into me feeling angry. So first of all, I just being me in this body with this brain, and having it not recognized to myself or to others, so I didn't know that there was something different, objectively different about me, although I felt it. So that made the world very stressful and made life very stressful. But then my response to that, whether it was to fight, to flight, to freeze, or to fawn, also made me extremely stressed. So you've got this this manifesting of stress that, whichever way you turn, apart from perhaps dissociation, to be fair, and even that, then it has its downside, because you can't detach for long before things start falling apart around you, and then it's that you're vulnerable. So this emotionality of mine, which mostly pinned on, the only motivating emotion there was anger. So at some point in the fighting, flighting, freezing and fawning, I'd get angry, often at myself, and that would then be the drive that I needed to get over that inertia and make some change. But getting angry and having anger as your blunt tool to then motivate you to change things is really, really tiring, exhausting, and it's not good on the nervous system. Underneath all of this anger and sadness and scaredness and whatever, I never have felt like a bad person, like a fundamentally dirty, bad, broken person. I've always felt good. I've always felt like, no, if only, just, that's why I think I've been drawn to that Girl Interrupted or Just Leave Me Alone. It's like, if I'm left to my own devices, I can actually fulfill my God-given destiny and be this wonderful person in the world that's not better than you, not worse than you, just me. It's just me. I'm just taking up a me-sized chunk of this planet, and I'm just going to get on with it, and you might like it, you might not, but you don't have to, just let me be me. So I'm really grateful that it never sort of challenged the core of me. I always felt quite secure, and I still do, in who I am, which I guess is why I can make these videos. I mean, you can't open yourself up to that level of feedback and scrutiny over what is essentially my own life, and what I'm telling you is just my experience of the world, which is mine to share. You can't do that without some level of self-esteem. So I think my self-esteem's always been quite good, but it's felt like it's just been dragged through the mud and in battles that it really didn't need to be in. And that's because of this extreme stress response and anger, my anger, and not recognising that anger was this sad, mad and scared, and there's some righteousness in that anger that could have been sort of quelled a little bit and nourished a little bit by knowing earlier on in life that I was autistic. But there's also this scared part, and the scared part is how all of this stress response leads me to losing my life skills and then being more vulnerable. So it puts me in a position where it lumps more stress on me. So I'm still a work in progress there. I feel better than I was yesterday, better than I was a few months ago, etc., etc. But it's a journey. It's not something that getting the diagnosis made better. It's something that getting the diagnosis made visible. Thank you.